Nick Koumalatsos.
There
Did I
you
get
go.
anywhere close to that?
That's fine, man. It's your accent. It's an accent thing. It's not even the one.
Well, mate, I tell you what, in Australia, very few people can understand me because I'm an Irishman living in Australia. So,
Yeah.
so we'll just run with that theme. Nick, welcome to the podcast, mate. You are lots of different things to lots of different people, right?
Yeah.
So you are a coach, you run men's health retreats, you're an entrepreneur, you've been in the fitness industry, you're ex-military. So just give people a bit of a sense of your story from a high level, like just starting as a kid, and take us through the journey.
Yeah, I grew up without an active father in the home. Not something that I even realized was unnormal. And obviously that plays into a lot of different things, right? I mean, we know the statistics really worldwide, any first or second world country that doesn't have a father in the home, how that kind of plays out with, education, crime, etc., success later in life. Anyways, so yeah, I didn't grow up. I had my brother and my mom. We used to, make jokes that my mom was running from the law because we would move every 6 months to a different school.
Wow.
As an adult, I'm like, Mom, why were we moving around? And she was like, honestly, it's just jobs. If I could get a job making this much money, and I'd move us. So we were just trying to survive. And I asked her one, I was like, how much were you making, take care of, and she was laughing. I was like, 1,000 a month. She was like, sometimes like 500 a month, $500 to $1,000 a month.
And trying to bring up two boys on that.
So like later in life, I honestly was like, man, it's actually pretty impressive. Like we're survivors, and never took really a handout from anything. But no, stateside, we never got on welfare. She always worked. That was kind of like one of our family things. I come from kind of a poor family, but they just valued hard work. I think it had a lot to do with my grandfather. My grandfather was a Korean War and Vietnam veteran. And he just had we had a very high work ethic, and realizing that what you make is comes off your own hands. And that was even as a kid, I remember that kind of, that core value, if you will, kind of being, and it stuck with me. At 11 years old, I got my first job. In the States, we get this thing called like a Social Security statement. And you pay in, like they take it out of, in most countries, they take wages for taxes and for different things, right? Well, one of the things is for Social Security for your retirement if you when you reach that ripe old age, right? Well, if you go back on my statement, it says that I've been paying Social Security since 1993, which was, I was 11 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think we lie. I don't even know how, because that's like, at that point, I'm not even sure that was legal, but somehow we squeezed through, and my Social Security started in 1993. So it was just always a thing that, like, if you want money, if you want things, you got to work for it. That's how it goes. So anyways, long story short, I hated moving, but I'll kind of come back to that when I get into the military. Because I didn't have an active father in the home, I did have a stepfather that was coming in and out. I believe he worked on like gas oil pipeline type stuff, like rigs. And so he was kind of coming and going from the time I was about 5 until the time I was about 11.
Nick, did you find that to be helpful or more disruptive, having this guy who you saw?
Well, I'll tell you, he was physically abusive to me and emotionally abusive to my brother.
Right.
And obviously I'm a kid at the time, so it's, you kind of have to take it. And at 11 years old is the time that I fought back, and I got thrown through a closet door. We had a little tussle. Obviously there's a grown man. I'm 11, we know how that's going to go. But that tussle is what woke up my mom, and she was able to, that's when she found out of the situation. And then it all came out. I jumped through a window. I escaped the house and ran away. And that was the end of that. and she left him that on the spot, kicked him out, left him on the spot. To be honest, she never knew any of the other stuff was going down. But through that, the lack of a actual, positive role model, I went straight into this need for community, this need for acceptance, which landed me in basically a quote unquote a gang, if you will.
I was just about to say there is a bit of a phenomenon in Australia about young male gangs.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people are pointing the finger that a lot of them are immigrants, but a lot of them tend to have absent fathers and, brought up with no role models, and they just gravitate towards their own groups, don't they? Because they need that sense of connection.
And you know what? And because I didn't have it, they were right there waiting on it. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, guys, if you don't man up and be that, there is a group of people out there that is waiting for that young man to show up and be like, yeah, come on.
And that's where you then get your values from and your behaviors and all of that stuff, right?
That's right. That's exactly it. Now that becomes your core values. That becomes the rules of engagement for life. And that's exactly what happened. And so that happened right at 11. It was ironic, like being at the age I am now and looking back at it, like, that altercation happened, me feeling in danger or me feeling weak or something like that. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm going to go get someone who is going to have my back and be a part of a community that is going to protect me. And if you look at it, and ironically enough, the gang was called the Irish Shenanigans.
There you go. You're the token Greek in there, were you?
Yeah. And what's funny is my actual father, like, he wasn't around, but when he found out, he was pissed, and he was like, you're not Irish, you're Greek. What the hell? And, anyways, it was funny. But yeah, man, by the time I was 13, so that happened when I was 11. By the time I was 13, I was a 2-time convicted felon as an adult. Yeah. So just 2 short years, had 2 felonies under my belt that would not get expunged when I turned 18. I thought it was going to, but it did not. Yeah. Cost me something in the future. So that happened, and I got rolled up with the police, and obviously got thrown in juvie. That was a whole long time right there. And I make a joke. I say, by the time I was 14, I was clean on the straight and narrow. I'd stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, stopped breaking laws. So by 14, I'd cleaned up my life. You know what I mean?
Wow. And what then led you to the military as a young man?
That's where it goes. So I am 17 years old. I just turned 17 years old. I'm working at a place called Bay Point Marriott. In the morning, I was an audio visual consultant for, I want to say I was making like $15 an hour in the mid 90s. Hooking up, conference centers, so like hooking up projectors, lights, microphones from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then I would take a 30-minute break. I'd have a club sandwich and fries every single day. At 2:30 to 10:30, I was a bellman at the same resort. It became very consistent. And I go, I don't want that for my life in 20 or 30 years. Like, that's not where I want to be in 20 or 30 years. So I make the joke saying that I hit the nuclear option. I blew up my life. And I was like, well, screw it. The only way out that I know is the military. My grandfather did it. And, the time in the 90s, I don't know if you know this, but the Marine Corps' marketing tactics in the 90s was spot on. I mean, spot on. You had guys battling dragons with swords. And they're saying that, we don't promise you a rose garden. And they're like, this is the hardest thing. And they had sexy uniforms. And I'm like, dude, if I'm going to join the military, I'm obviously going to go fight dragons and be a Marine.
Yes.
And what young man doesn't want to go fight a dragon, right? With a sword. And so I went and talked to the Marine recruiter, and he did his thing. And then he got my information down and went in the back. And I'll never forget the look on his face when he came out and was like, kid, you're not joining the Marine Corps nor any branch. You're a high school dropout and a convicted felon. And keep in mind, Clinton was the president at the time. So he was crushing. He was in the middle of crushing the military. It was a huge drawdown. So like so I had medical issues, I had to need a drug waiver. I had to have a waiver for my criminal background. I was a high school dropout, and he told me no. And I'll tell you right now, Paul, that was the biggest mistake he could have done, was tell a rebellious kid no. Because all I did was that became my mission. Quit my job, moved in with my grandmother, and you're talking, I threw all that money away and moved in with my grandmother, started working nights at a movie theater for like $4.50 an hour. I remember getting my first check after 2 weeks, and it was like $175. And I'm like, how are people surviving off of this? And then joined a college to do a semester, because if you join a college, get accepted, and do one semester and then drop out, you're no longer a high school dropout. You're a college
you're a
dropout.
college dropout.
And we know the military loves a college dropout. So that's what I did. So I did that. It almost took me 2 years to get in. And so that's what I did. I got 100 letters of recommendation from bosses and friends and family and people my mom knew about me. And I just made it. I just went on a mission, man. That was my mission. And joined them, and ended up joining the Marine Corps at 18, turned 19 in recruit training, and in 2000.
And how did you find the training for the Marines and that whole community? Was that something that you just
I
jumped right
mean,
into?
it was, I guess you could say it was hard in a way. I mean, you got to keep in mind that, that era of youth was different. Like, we grew up outside. We didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. The internet came around late 90s for us.
Yeah.
But it wasn't nothing to sit around on. It was like, I remember using AOL Messenger. Hey, where are you at? Okay, cool. I'm going to meet you over there. You know what I mean? It was more of a way to message people. And so I was very physical. I was already lifting weights. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to get jacked all the time. Eating protein, following old, Arnold
The old
bodybuilder
school
type
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just what we did. And so it was very, very different. It wasn't nothing. It was hard, but it wasn't something like, we didn't have this belief that we couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The issue came into play where, after working for almost 2 years to get in the military, on training day 7, I broke my wrist and I got dropped to a medical rehabilitation platoon.
Oh, this is post when you'd finished all your training.
No, this was in boot camp.
Oh,
This was in
right.
recruit training. I
Right.
got there. I was like, yes, I made it. I'm going in. Everything was going good. On training day 7, I broke my wrist and I got dropped, and that spiraled me for a little bit. And that was a whole weird experience. But once I got over myself and stopped being a little baby about it, because I had a moment. I'll be honest, Paul. I had a moment where I turned into a little baby and threw a temper tantrum a little bit. But once I got over that, I realized, okay, how can I turn this negative into a really good positive? So honestly, the criminal in me just came out. I'm like, I learned all the drill instructors' habits, their rotations, how the island worked, the timing of everything, who's who in the zoo, how the system works on the island. And I just learned everything. And when I did, and then after 2.5 months, I went back to 2.5 months. I went back to training, picked up on training day 7, but I had been there for almost 3 months. So nobody could hold a candlestick to me. I was the leader. I became the guide and the leader of the platoon, and I held that and ended up graduating number 1, all because I made the decision that I was going to utilize this as a positive, to learn as much knowledge. Like, what's on the test? What's on the test in 2 months? Well, I'm going to learn all of it. And I did. I studied all the books. I paid attention to what was coming and going. I knew all the cycles of all the drill instructors and what platoons, and like if anybody wanted to know something, I knew it. I knew all of the history. I knew all of the data. I knew everything. So before they came in and said what they were going to say, I'm like, oh, it's week 4. This is what we're going to go do. This is the cycle that we're in. So I'll tell the guys, I'm like, okay, get ready. This is what's going to happen. Just that's the old thing is like I turned lemons into lemonade.
Yes, yes.
That's it really is. Like I got handed a bad deal and I just manipulated it for a positive. I could have sat there and been sad for 2.5 months and made no progress and then picked right back up, but I chose differently. And it's little things like that over a period of a life that really changes where you're at.
That's a big philosophy of the ancient Stoic philosophers, is to make the best of a bad situation, right?
It's a lesson. It's a tuition payment if you
Yeah.
want it to be, right. That's the real school. And now being 43, almost 44, like looking at life, I'm like, oh, there is a reoccurrence of the same situation over and over and over, and I keep making the same decision. And a good friend of mine said, we have the freedom of choice, we don't have the freedom of consequence.
Yeah.
Right. And but we do have the freedom of choice, and in which direction and how you're going to perceive something is 100% on you. And over a period of time, I think it all started in my youth of just having to persevere through adversity and not really having a choice. That just became like a core DNA thing of me, almost to a fault, because there's sometimes that I get told no, or something gets, I have this thing, and man, I'm like a freaking bulldog.
And this is the thing, the bit that all the positive psychology in the world can't teach you,
Right.
is the lessons that are learned through adversity and through doing hard stuff.
Yeah. So now I teach. It's funny. I have this on my thing. If you can see that, hard over easy.
Yeah.
And now, so I teach this concept of choosing hard over easy, because you can choose hard now and have it easy later, or you can choose easy now, and I promise you, hard is going to come.
Yeah. I often say in workshops, like, it's not easy getting up early in the morning and going and doing a workout. It's not easy turning a lovely warm shower to cold, right? It's not
Right.
easy choosing the healthy food over the unhealthy, attractive food. It's not easy to have to do the work, right? It's all hard, but it's a shitload harder when you talk to people later in life who are in shocking shape, riddled with disease, and nowhere near the potential. So it's all hard. So choose your bloody hard, right?
Choose your hard, man. That's it. And it's so funny, like that became like, we've done this for so long, and now it's become like, I got my wife saying that, like, we'll say something about our relationship, and it's like, well, choose your hard, right? You want to have a hard conversation now, or you want to ruin a relationship later, 2 years down the road.
So, mate, this is and the reason that this is top of mind for me is I've just submitted the manuscript for my second book, which is around,
Congratulations.
or thank you, around something called hardiness, which you'll be a fan of.
Yeah.
Now, I start with a story that has influenced a lot of Western philosophy, and actually, what we're talking about right now, and it's the trials of Hercules. Way back in Greek mythology, where the young Hercules ends up at a crossroads, and there are two paths, and one of the paths is shown to him by Kakia, who is this very beautiful young woman, and promises him a life of ease and all of this. And then the other path is the path of Arete, and where she says, if you choose this path, life will be hard, but it will be meaningful. And that's the path that Hercules chooses, right?
It's funny you say that. When I talk to people about joining the GOGI, our men's community, my coaching group, I'm like, I will be 100% honest with you. Your life will not get easier by joining. It will be actually much harder. All of the easy choices that you're choosing now won't be there. You're going to have to choose the hard choices, but your life will be so much better and so much more meaningful.
And so let's jump into that. So
Yeah.
why particularly did you start to focus on on men's health and men's coaching? Was that just because of the journey that you'd gone through and seeing lots of people on the wayside and actually going, hey, there's a different path here?
Yeah, so I guess it really started with my transition. I wrote a book called The Excommunicated Warrior: The Seven Stages of Transition. And that story kind of outlines my exit from special operations. So what I didn't really talk about is once I got into the Marine Corps, I joined a unit called Second Force Reconnaissance Company. I was with Recon for a number of years, and then Marine Special Operations Command stood up. I took selection for that. I spent the last half of my career working with SOCOM under Marine Special as a Marine Raider, and doing special operations in the support of global war on terrorism until 2012.
Wow.
And then I exited from that. When I exited, I thought I had it all figured out, but unfortunately, I did not. And I had a very rough, like you hear a lot of veterans have, a very challenging transition back to normal life.
Yes. Yes.
And
What was the most difficult thing for you?
when it comes down to it, if I strip away all, I could say a lot of things, but if I strip away all of it, it comes down to identity.
Mm,
You really lose your identity of who you are, because Nick, it was a reconnaissance Marine. I was a Force Recon Marine. I was a Marine Raider. And what that means is that's how I train. That's how my brain works. It's the clothes that I wear, the neighborhood that I live in, the job that I do.
mm,
It's what I look up on the internet. It's who I can conversate with. It's everything, right? And if you take that away from me, then who and what am I? And
mm,
I didn't know. And there's a lot of rhetoric for like saying soft for life, special operation forces for life, Marine Raider for life, this and that, recon for life. But the reality is, when you leave, you're done. The phone
mm.
stops ringing.
Yeah.
Your buddies stop calling. They're moving on. They think that you're good. So like, we could talk for hours about that. And what's interesting about that is the same across the board for anything. Law enforcement, firefighter, the fire service, medical community.
A lot of athletes, right, have
I said it.
similar issues
The
with
story I
transition.
put in my book is like this, about a young man who starts like like pee-wee football at 4 years old, and he plays football there. He plays in elementary, middle, high school, college, gets in, or gets drafted straight into the NFL, and then blows his knee out at 23 years old. This man does not remember not playing football. He is a footballer. That's what he
Mm,
does.
mm.
And at 23 years old, he blows his knee out and can't play anymore. And Paul, I cannot tell you how many of those people have reached out to me and how many people I've met in that same exact thing. At that young of age, they go, if I can't play this sport, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in life.
Yeah. I think it's across the board, right? Is that when people have their identity wrapped up in their job,
Yeah.
and then that changes, that
Yeah.
that often people have a very, very hard landing, and then often it will then coincide with age and the whole midlife crisis thing
Mhm.
and changing
Yeah.
hormones and all
Yeah.
of that shit that I know
It's
you're very
it's like
well
a
versed in.
colossal, just epic
Shit show, right?
shit show all at once. That's exactly what happens. And that's the reason why. So going back to your question is like, one, it really started with me. I mean, here I am, a 6 foot tall, 240, 10% body fat, in my early 30s, to a couple years later, 6 foot tall, 240, almost 30% body fat.
Jumping Jesus.
Yeah. I love sharing that photo, because to me, that the photo of me on the beach in Greece with my family looking like that shows how far someone can get lost. And the truth of it is, that guy, and people go like, well, that wasn't that bad. You didn't look that bad, blah, 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 blah. I think I did because the way I look. But, like, I wasn't, 400 pounds like we get guys that are coming in. I was out of shape. I was soft and out of shape. And, but the reality is, Paul, like, I was depressed. I hated myself. I had a lot going on in my head, that, like, that guy was miserable. That
Mm,
guy was living a life of quiet desperation. So, through a friend, and actually a good friend, Nick Bear and BPN. I was doing a lot of media stuff, and I became an athlete through Bear Performance Nutrition, and one of their first actually. And I said, "Hey, dude, I want to get in phenomenal shape. I want to show people what you can do." So I started this thing, and I just like snapped out of it. I remembered who I was, and I did this thing called the 90-day vlog, where I launched the business. In 90 days, I went from like 28% body fat to 10% body fat in 90 days. And I was going to make a video every single day for 90 days and just document this journey of how basically it was like a New Year's, instead of having New Year's resolutions, because everybody has a New Year's resolution, but without a plan, your New Year's resolution is just a wish, right?
Yeah.
So I want to show people how to execute. So I just threw myself in this hopper, and I got in phenomenal shape. When I did, the next year, people started asking me, and I said, and it changed so much. Like as soon as I got in shape, I had, and I got my hormones figured out on TRT. I had a lot more clarity in my life, right? The brain fog lifted. I had more energy, I had more drive. I had clarity in my vision of where I wanted to go. And I was like, holy shit, man, this is the real deal. Um, and then guys started hitting me up, and I was like, "Oh man, well you just need to get in shape." So Josh and I started who was a teammate of mine, started what now is the GOGI in 2018, and it was like old school fitness and nutrition coaching. I send you a
Right.
Google sheet, we worked off Google sheets and or whatever they were at the time. People would put in their macros, and then we'd issue training, and very rudimentary. And
Now,
go ahead.
Nate, before we dive, because I do want to dive into that, but I just want to rewind a little.
Yeah.
How much of that descending fog and the difficulties of leaving the Marines, how much of that do you think was that loss of identity as I'm no longer a Marine Raider? And how much of it was a loss of purpose? Have you
I
ever
think it,
thought about those elements?
I think it was one and the same.
Mm,
I think it was one and the same. One, it's not who I am, and then and the thing is I still had a job to do. Like I still always created something, but I didn't know. I think I was just doing, Paul. I don't think I had a true purpose, which
mm.
is okay. I think we give too much weight to purpose. Purpose can be whatever you make it to be. It doesn't have to be this like, like the heavens open up
Oh,
and the angel
absolutely.
ascends, you know.
Absolutely, but we we
But I
we need
think
it.
people are waiting on that. They're like,
Mm.
I haven't had
Yes.
this epiphany of my purpose. I'm like, dude, your purpose can be
Th
whatever you want it to be.
then
Stop
I
making,
often say people are waiting for the purpose fairy.
yeah. I'm like, dude, there's so much weight given to this word purpose, and I'm like, dude, purpose can be whatever you want it to be this week. Like change it. And it should change. In a year it'd be different. But
Mm,
to give your point, I didn't really know, I guess, what direction. I was just doing, which is good, right? If you don't know what
mm.
to do, just do,
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
execute.
yeah, yeah.
And then through that execution, you'll find, and that's exactly what happened to me.
Well, I think the doing is you're in forwards motion towards
Yes.
something, right? And
Something.
that's what brings them. We're talking about fairies, purpose fairies, but that's what brings the motivation fairy. This
Yeah.
is a lot of people are sitting waiting for the motivation fairy when they don't realize that if they start acting
Yes.
and have a goal and see they're in forwards motion towards a goal, that's what releases dopamine in the brain and gives you the
Yeah.
further motivation.
And through this journey, right, of this me transitioning, it's all in the book, me transitioning out of the military and learning, I threw myself into like different therapies, and I became a guinea pig because I was running a nonprofit helping other veterans. And so and there's something to that, right? There's this idea of service. If you're
Yes,
depressed,
yes,
go help
yeah,
somebody,
yeah,
go help
yeah,
go help three people that are worse off than you. So
100%.
I started doing that more and more. And because I was on this journey, that was really there was no destination for this journey. I was just doing, I was just executing. But through that, I started to find different people and different things that would come across my life that I would gain even more clarity. And it was like
Mm,
a positive snowball effect.
yes,
And that, I think it was, I didn't have this like idea of purpose other than I did this idea that I just needed to keep moving forward.
Mm.
And that's when I developed my kind of like, there was this thing that I say, and people even say it back to me now, and I have a shirt for it, is never quit, never surrender, always forward. And it's just, by, with, and through is kind of like the old special operations idea of things. It was just continue. If you got to go to move forward, if you hit a wall, maybe you need to go through it, maybe you need to go over it, or maybe you need to go around it, but
Mm.
regardless is, don't stay where you're at, just keep moving forward. And that's where I was for a long time. I was like, I'm just going to move forward. Now, obviously, the more you lean into personal development, the more that I leaned into growth, the more that I kept doing that, I got smarter, and things did become more clear. And then I start realizing like what there was a thing that happened that I realized what my personal mission was. And once I realized that, things became even more clear. And then we just dialed everything in over the years.
Now, that's really interesting that you talk about that, because often if I'm in workshops and I'm talking about purpose, I'll say very similar to what you're doing. There's a
Yeah,
lot of people think that their purpose in life needs to be running a multi-million-dollar startup and an orphanage in Nepal at the same
sure.
time, and I'm like, that's bullshit. When you look at all of it, it's about being of service, being an
Yeah.
integrated part of your community, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just start with something. And I get people to write a little tombstone statement about how they would like their life to be viewed when they've passed,
The
and just get it.
eulogy. Yeah. We
Yeah.
use the eulogy too. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
powerful.
and it's powerful, right? But what it does is it starts to get people to think about how they want to be, and then I say, all I want you to do now is what you've written down here. Spend 5 to 10 minutes a day deliberately acting on that. So if it's about being a great dad or a great mom, spend 5 minutes a day deliberately being great, because
Yeah.
then when your attention is on it, your brain is going to commit cells to it, and you're going to get clarity over time, right? Which is exactly what you just said.
Where your focus goes, your energy flows, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So mate, let's then tease apart. So I think we've established the importance of being in forwards motion,
Yeah.
and of that. I loved what you said about was it by, round, and through in terms of
Yeah. By,
obstacles,
with, and through.
by, with, and through,
Yeah.
which is awesome. So talk me through some of the elements of your coaching, whether how much of it's mindset, how much of it's physical, why is the
So
physical important, all of that stuff.
absolutely. So it started out physical pretty much only. Um, and then Josh and we get this stuff back because you do like weekly check-ins, right? And we would get their
Mm,
stuff back. You see their weight, and then we'd see their logs, and we're like, dude, why can't these guys, these are grown men, why can't these grown men stay consistent? Why can't they hit their numbers? Why can't they do the things that they're supposed to do? They signed up, they're the ones paying. Why can't they do it? And so we started talking to these guys, and we realized that they didn't have a fitness and nutrition problem. They had a mindset problem.
mm,
They had a
mm,
limiting belief problem. They had a trauma problem. They were just broken men, really, on the inside that nobody knew. And so we turned it into almost a men's mentorship community. So we started hosting I started hosting coaching calls, and this is really when things started to we started to actually build a real company away from Excel sheets. So we developed an app, and we started having Zoom, group Zoom calls, and we developed a thing to where like they could all be talking to each other like in social media,
yeah.
and really build a community. And we realized that when we started to attack the deep underlying issues of why they're self-sabotaging, why they're choosing food as comfort, why they're choosing all these bad habits, that's when we started to see results. And it wasn't enough. We started to, like last year, we actually just went through another revamp where I was like, it's not enough, man. Like, still not enough. So two things that we did was we created this educational, we have our pillars, which is our fitness pillar. Like, I feel like fitness is a gateway drug to success.
I love that. Yeah.
It is, because through fitness, you find discipline, you find consistency, you find delayed gratification, which transfers into all areas of your life, right? So fitness, and then discipline in your life, discipline with your marriage, your children, your time, just being disciplined over well, being able to say no to things, right?
And it's interesting, Nick, that the discipline, it's like the bad D word that people don't talk about, right? When
Yeah.
it comes to
Right.
behavioral change. And you read all the research, and I'm thinking, where the hell's the discipline element to
Yeah.
this? Because
Right.
motivation's great when it's around, but when motivation's not there, that's
I
when
mean,
discipline is
and
really
I love
important.
that you brought that up, because Paul, how old are you?
I'm 53.
53,
Sorry,
Paul.
no, that's a lie. I'm 54.
54. That's what happens. Over 50, I don't think it matters when you say that.
I just turned 54 last week. There you go.
Yeah. So at 54, are you motivated to get your body up and go train every day?
There's not a shitload of motivation, but I do it.
Exactly. That's like, motivation's great. It's like a drug. It's like doing a line of cocaine, but it fades. It
Yes.
fades. And that's what people hit me up. They're like, you don't need motivation. You don't need motivation. What you need is a plan. What you need is a why. And that kind of goes
Mm,
back to the third pillar, we wrote belief for our third pillar, and belief being belief in yourself, believing
mm,
that you're worthy of love, believing that you are worthy of success, that you don't have limiting beliefs, that you don't think that your past failures are going to be your future failures, that you're stuck in this whatever this system is that you're in. The belief that you can have the body that you want, that you can have the relationship that you want with your wife, that you can be the father to that you need to be with your kids, that you believe that. Because
mm.
we found that when people don't believe that, they'll never achieve it until they start believing it.
Yeah, and I think that concept of belief is heavily wrapped up in hope and optimism,
Yeah.
right? If people don't have hope for the future, like Jesus, the wheels can come off big time,
Yeah.
right? And
And then
that
what's
that
the
just
point, right? If they don't
yeah,
have that, then what's the point? And the
yes.
last one being tribe, and it's kind of a tricky one, because what it really comes down to for us and Josh and I and the rest of the guys is, why do you get up in the morning and go sacrifice? Why do you go to the gym? Why do you delay gratification? And for
Mm,
us, it's really about our tribe. It's our why. Because when we find a guy that's like, I just want to look good naked, for me. Well, when it's 4 o'clock in the morning, it's 30 degrees out in the garage, and you got to go do burpees for time for 10 minutes. Like, it doesn't sound real fun, but it's so that my son looks at me and doesn't think that I'm a fat piece of shit, and
mm.
looks at me as a superhero and a role model and says, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you. That's what will get you up out of the bed. Looking good naked, that's only going to get you so far. It's like
Yeah.
motivation. We have to have a deeper why of why we are doing the uncomfortable things, why we're choosing hard over easy every single day. And it's got to be greater than ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And Anthony Robbins, find your why, you'll find your way. But he stole it from Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, who
Yeah.
100 years ago said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how.
And I'm sure it probably came even further from that to the
Yes,
philosophers of
correct.
Greece, and probably they stole it from who knows what, prior to
Yes.
that. But it is true. The human body, like I like Simon Sinek's talk on how great leaders inspire. If
Mm,
anybody's ever seen that, and he really breaks the psychology down of the why in the
start
human
with
brain.
why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and how we associate with things at a very deep emotional level. And then you get people, if you want to inspire people, you have to give them the why, and that's part of one of the reasons why we do. So those are our pillars. Those are the foundation, a bedrock of what we stand on. But then
Mm,
we took it another phase. We took it another step further. We developed these 4 phases, and the first one was mastering yourself. Like, you have to master yourself. You can't do anything until you can master yourself, and in all areas, your
yeah.
fitness, your belief, those pillars that we told you about. And a lot of guys like, well, I want my money better and I want my relationship better. I'm like, well, none of that's going to be better until you are better. Like, you can't, if you don't have the discipline to put the cookie down, you're not going to have discipline to save a tenth of your earnings.
Mm. I think it's Leonardo da Vinci who talks about dominion over yourself and having mastery. And he said, without that, you got nothing.
You got nothing. So we developed this educational platform. We broke down what does it mean to master yourself, and so what we did was we created that. Right, we created this platform to really dive into how do I master myself with all the worksheets, all the coaching, everything, the videos, and then we make it sequential because like the second one is leading your family. Phase 2 is leading your family. You cannot lead your family until you can lead yourself. Because if you come in, and we saw this, and we used to do these 30-day challenges, Paul, and these guys would jump on the challenge and they'd pay their little $99 and they'd do this 30-day challenge. Like, okay, I got my macros. This is my food list. And they'd go into the kitchen and they start throwing stuff out. And okay, tell the whole family, hey, we're doing it. I'm doing a challenge. You're doing a challenge. We're all doing a challenge. We're doing a family. And the wife's like, you were the one picking Cheetos out of your belly button last night while you were sitting on the couch watching Netflix. What are you talking about? No sugar and all this. You know what I mean? Like, just trust, absolutely no belief, no, like absolutely just, a complete hypocritical person. Right. And I was like, guys, and we saw this time and time again. They're like, my family won't get on board, etc. I'm like, of course they're not going to get on board. Like, you're not consistent. They don't believe you. You're full of shit.
You got to earn the right to lead in any domain, right?
That's right. So that's what we did. And then we start to, and then phase 2 is really diving into with the significant other, leading the family, being an intentional father. What kind of father are you? Truly being an intentional one, not a present one, but an intentional one. Having rebuilding trust from broken promises, and having to kind of, there's some workshops in there of having what we call the need conversation with your significant other, where they kind of get to download everything that you've potentially done to them, overtly or inadvertently, doesn't really matter, right? Or indirectly or whatever, not on purpose, maybe, but how it affected them. And maybe there's some resentment that's being built up, and resentment will kill any relationship. It's like a
Yeah.
cancer. We have to get rid of resentment. So we have these things in there. And it's only then that we can get to phase 3, which is master your finances. Money, your financial plan. Well, then you're gonna have problems there. You're gonna have rub there. You're gonna have strife in your relationship because you guys are not heading in the same direction. You don't have the same vision. So all this financial stuff that you want to do, and I talk about online or I talk about in the group, is not all for naught, because it's going to create havoc in your house. She has to be aligned with you. The only way she can be aligned with you is if we go back to mastering yourself, and that you're leading with intention and purpose, right? She has trust. You guys are on the same page. You've rebuilt your relationship. You're dating your wife. Your wife is now your girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's only then that we can master your finances. And then we get into really, really diving into what that means, and really unconventional wealth growth, like really how wealthy people utilize wealth, utilizing debt, and how they use debt and life insurance and a lot of different things for investments and whatnot. So we dive heavily into that. And the last phase is the legacy, the leadership. What is your legacy? What is that going to build, and kind of go from there?
Yeah, I like the stepwise approach through that. That it's built from the bottom up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I mean, a few elements of that basically trust really comes from doing what you say that you're going to do. And if there's broken promises, that will kill the trust. And
It will
then if
kill it.
people are
Yeah.
not aligned, you got two different people rowing in different directions. The boat's going friggin' nowhere, is it?
Nowhere. Yeah. And how many times have we met people or seen that where it's like, oh, you guys are a mess. You guys are going nowhere fast, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, mate, what's the what is the biggest thing that kind of comes out from guys who've gone through your program? Like, what is the biggest difference you see from the start to the finish?
Man, I'll say this. I got a text from a guy just as we got on. Let me pull it up. Gents, down in Florida with the fam, riding roller coasters left and right. Last time here, I was too fat to ride anything. Now I'm making memories with the kids. Thanks for giving me this gift.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That
Paul,
must give you goosebumps when you get stuff like that.
it makes you want to cry. Paul, that's every day. That's every day. I think the biggest thing out of it is that I give people the permission to take over their life, to be the captain of their own ship and the CEO of their own life.
Yeah, that's very cool. And mate, that last question, how much building a community, how much has it done for you, having been the guy who's been through several different identities, and now you've got that community? What's the impact on you?
Man, I'll tell you, I literally will post in our group all the time because I'll link up with people. There isn't a problem or a place that I can go that I don't find somebody from our community and have the most wholesome, real world conversations that men aren't having anywhere else. And the fact to think that me and my best friend built this over years from nothing. And I learned so much, like just linking up with these men and having them kind of open up and to give them an opportunity to just be open and real with really what's going on. Because everybody's pat this facade, right? Nobody ever, you ask a man how he's doing, fine. And the reality is you scratch just a little bit of crust off the surface and there's a lot of pain going on, a lot of loneliness, a lot of heartache, a lot of frustration. And to be able to have created something that gives them a place to be open and honest, but not just like, don't get me wrong, we're not a crying place. We'll acknowledge the pain, we'll acknowledge the trauma. And I kind of want to talk about the retreat real quick, but we'll acknowledge all that. But because I think of our background, we're a very tactical community. That's why the phases were so important. I have to give a man needs a task. Okay, this is broken. This is not right. What is the tool that's going to get me to the next level? Right. Like, I don't want to just give it to God. And I understand that. I'm a faith guy as well, but like, God doesn't drive a parked car. Like, we have to actually do something. We have to take action.
And he's not coming to sort your shit out either, right?
No, right. He's already given you the tools. You got to do the work, right? And so I think that's what it comes down to, is just the fact that we've been able to, I feel so fulfilled that we have created a place for the men that raise their hand and say, you know what? That's the type of guy that I want. That's the type of guy that I am on the inside. I just got to get all this other stuff out of it. And I think it's designed because you take men and you isolate them and they lose their power. You unite men in a community, you can't beat them. Yeah. You can go to my website, nickkoumalatsos.com, or thegogi.com. Thank you, Paul, very much. Oh my God. So Paul, this was the biggest thing, man, because we've been running events for a long time and you can only do so much online. I was literally talking to my wife. I was like, I just need to get my hands on these guys. Like, I want to get my hands on them and online's great. Online's great, but there is something kind of magical when you get a group of men in a room together. And I can prove that to you, because if any man listening to this thinks about when there's no women around and they go link up with all their bros, whether it be for positive or negative reasons, whether they're drinking or they're doing something, a camping trip, it doesn't really matter what it is, doing jiu-jitsu, it doesn't really matter. When guys link up, the weight comes off their shoulders. They laugh more. They tell stories. That's what we created, but with intention. What I learned was that through doing this, and I really didn't believe it, I didn't know, 1 in 3 men are physically abused, 1 in 4 men are sexually abused. And that statistics reign true every single time I get a group of people in a room. And this is the reason why men continue to self-sabotage. And they do the roller coaster, because they haven't dealt with that. And I have this thing where I talk about I can take shit and turn into apple pie. And I really do believe that. And I've proven it multiple times in private rooms we're the worst of the worst. And you're like, there's no way. How do I turn this into a superpower? And we do it every time. But I can't, that's not something I can do online. I've got to break bread with you. I've got to sweat with you. I've got to earn your trust. I've got to give you permission to know that my heart is your heart and your heart is mine, and we're good to go. We're friends. We're brothers. And when all of that comes, and I know it sounds crazy, but when all of that weight comes away, all of that bravado and all of that ego comes away and stripes down, that's when men can open up. And the most amazing thing happens. And when a man can shed that weight he's been holding on for years, is when he can really his life will soar. He can be the leader that he can be the leader that he knows he was supposed to become. He can be the husband that he knew he was supposed to become. He can have the body that he was always meant to have. And it was those little things that was keeping him from that. It was the obstacle. And that's what we do on these retreats is we break bread. And it's crazy. 2025, we're more connected. I'm talking to you in Melbourne, Australia. I got family there. And I'm in North Carolina. We're more connected than we ever have been ever in the history of men, right? Yet we are more disconnected than ever before as well. And that's why I think this mission is so important is online communities are great, but we have to break bread together. We've got to sweat together.